It was the kind of cold evening that makes people hurry past strangers without looking back. Lights glowed softly in store windows. Laughter echoed briefly then disappeared into the night. A single father walked with his children, unaware that one moment would redefine their understanding of humanity forever. Just ahead sat a young woman in a wheelchair. She did not shout. She did not cry. She did not beg. She raised her hands and spoke without a voice. Her fingers formed a simple message meant for anyone willing to see. Please help me. Most people turned away. Some pretended not to notice. But the children noticed. And when children watch their parent in moments like this, a decision becomes more than an action. It becomes a lesson that shapes hearts for a lifetime. What happened next would uncover buried pain, awaken forgotten hope, and remind everyone present that even silent courage can change the loudest destinies. Stay with this story until the end because kindness never ends where it begins. Snow drifted gently through the evening air, soft enough to feel harmless yet sharp enough to sting exposed skin. The city glowed with warm lights, but beneath that glow, people moved quickly, guarded, wrapped in their own worries. Daniel walked at a steady pace, one hand holding his youngest daughter's mitten, the other carrying shopping bags that felt heavier than they should. Since losing his wife, weight had taken on a different meaning. Some of it lived in his arms. Most of it lived in his chest. His daughters stayed close, their voices rising and falling as they pointed at decorated windows. Daniel listened, smiled when he remembered, and breathed when the memories threatened to pull him under. Nights like this were dangerous. Beautiful, yes, but fragile. One wrong thought could shatter the balance he worked so hard to maintain. As they passed a large department store, something slowed his steps. Not a sound. Not a shout. Just movement. A woman sat near the entrance, still except for her hands. They moved with careful intention, not rushed, not frantic. Calm. Almost practiced. Her eyes searched faces that never stopped long enough to meet hers. Daniel looked away at first. He had learned that sometimes survival meant not feeling everything. But Lucy tugged his sleeve. Her grip was gentle but insistent. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice uncertain. He followed her gaze. The woman's hands lifted again. This time, her eyes locked onto Daniel's. There was no panic in them. No drama. Just a quiet plea shaped by dignity and exhaustion. Daniel felt something tighten inside him. A feeling he could not name but could not ignore. People passed between them, blocking the view, erasing the moment. But when the crowd thinned, she was still there. Waiting. Daniel felt his daughters watching him now. Not asking questions. Just watching. He did not know why his feet stopped moving. He only knew that once they did, there was no turning back. The air between them felt heavier than the cold. Daniel stood still, aware of the rush of people flowing around him like a river that refused to notice a stone in its path. The woman's hands moved again, slower now, as if each motion required effort she no longer had. Her shoulders were tense, not from fear, but from the strain of holding herself together for too long. Emma leaned closer to Daniel and whispered, "Why is she not talking?" Daniel swallowed. He did not answer right away. He was watching the woman's face, the way hope flickered and dimmed with every person who passed without stopping. It was not rejection that hurt her most. It was invisibility. Lucy noticed the notebook resting on the woman's lap, the pencil tied to it with a string. She pointed softly. "Daddy, maybe she wants to write something." Daniel nodded, but his chest felt tight. He realized this was not a simple moment of kindness. Something about it felt fragile, like touching a wound that had never healed. The woman shifted slightly in her chair, her movements careful, controlled. Her hands formed the same message again, slower this time. "Please, help." Daniel recognized it clearly now. His heart pounded as memories surfaced of lessons long forgotten and promises once made to himself about the kind of man he wanted his children to see. He knelt so their eyes were level. The woman looked startled, then relieved, as if she had been holding her breath for hours. She reached for the notebook, but her fingers trembled. Daniel noticed then how pale she looked, how the cold had crept into her skin. Before she could write, footsteps stopped behind them. Someone cleared their throat. Daniel felt the weight of attention, the pressure of being watched. This was no longer a private choice. Whatever happened next would echo far beyond this moment. The woman hesitated, then slowly opened the notebook. Her hand hovered over the page as if choosing the right words might change her fate. Daniel noticed the scars along her wrist, faint but unmistakable, and the way she kept her breathing shallow. She wrote carefully, each letter deliberate, as though rushing might make the truth fall apart. When she turned the notebook toward him, Daniel felt his stomach tighten. It was not a request for money. It was not a demand. It was a story compressed into a few fragile lines. She had lost her hearing and her ability to walk in a single moment that rewrote her life. 6 months earlier she had been independent, employed, confident. Now she depended on strangers who rarely stopped. Daniel looked up, searching her face for exaggeration, for performance. He found none. Only shame layered over courage. The kind that forces a person to sit in the cold and ask for help without a voice. Sophie stepped forward, small and brave. She reached for Daniel's hand and squeezed it tightly. Her eyes never left the woman's face. That silent gesture struck him harder than the words on the page. His daughters were not afraid. They were paying attention. The woman's eyes filled, but she did not let the tears fall. She closed the notebook quickly as if she had already revealed too much. Around them, people slowed, curiosity sharpening their expressions. Some whispered. Others watched, waiting to judge what kind of man Daniel would be. He felt the pull of responsibility pressing against fear. He could walk away now. No one would stop him. But he knew something irreversible had already begun. Whatever choice he made would follow his children home and live with them long after the snow melted. Daniel reached out slowly, not touching her, just steadying the edge of the notebook before it slipped from her trembling fingers. The paper felt cold, as if it had absorbed every hour she had spent outside. He handed it back with care, meeting her eyes so she would know he had read every word. She inhaled deeply, then wrote again. This time the letters were smaller, tighter, as if the truth hurt more now that someone had stayed. She explained that the accident had taken her job, her apartment, and the people who once promised they would never leave. Her savings vanished under hospital bills. Her calls for help went unanswered once her situation stopped being temporary. Daniel felt a familiar ache spread through him. Loss recognized loss. He remembered nights when the house felt too quiet and mornings when he wondered how much strength he had left to give. He realized then that survival was not about being strong all the time. It was about finding someone who would see you when you could no longer stand on your own. Lucy knelt beside him, her voice soft. "Daddy, is she going to be okay?" Daniel could not answer honestly. "Not yet." He glanced at the woman, who had lowered her gaze as if expecting disappointment. She had told her truth. Now she waited for it to be dismissed. Around them, the street seemed to pause. The noise faded. Even the cold felt distant. Daniel understood that this was not about charity. It was about dignity. About what kind of world his daughters would grow up believing in. He took a breath, steady and deliberate. Then he did something that made the woman look up in shock and made the watching crowd grow quiet. Daniel removed his coat without hesitation and gently draped it around her shoulders. The fabric swallowed her thin frame, and for the first time since he had stopped, her composure cracked. Her lips parted, soundless, and her eyes glistened with disbelief. It was not the warmth that broke her. It was the fact that someone had seen her as human before seeing her as a problem. He signaled to his daughters to come closer. Lucy carefully placed her scarf around the woman's neck. Emma slipped her mittens onto the woman's hands, adjusting each finger with serious focus. Sophie smiled shyly, then pressed a small candy cane into her palm. The woman looked at the children as if she were seeing sunlight after a long winter. She reached for the notebook again, her hands shaking more than before. The words came slower now, heavier. She wrote that she had a daughter once. A little girl who loved snow and red mittens. The accident happened on the way to pick her up from school. The child never came home with her again. Custody was lost. Silence followed. So did the wheelchair. Daniel felt his throat tighten. He understood now why she still held herself with dignity. It was all she had left. The woman looked at him, searching his face, afraid she had shared too much. Daniel shook his head gently. No, this mattered. People nearby wiped their eyes. Some turned away, ashamed of having almost walked past. The moment was no longer about help. It was about healing that had waited too long to begin. Daniel did not rush the next decision. He knew some moments were meant to be handled with care, not speed. He knelt beside her again and spoke slowly so she could read his lips. "You are not alone. Not tonight. Not anymore." Her breath caught as she read his words. She shook her head at first, disbelief written across her face, but he stayed, steady and calm. He pulled out his phone and made a call, then another. A friend who worked with rehabilitation services. A neighbor who knew legal resources. A local shelter that helped families stay together. Each call carried the same quiet urgency. "Stay with me. Help is coming." The woman watched his lips, her eyes filling again, but this time the tears fell freely. Not from pain but from relief. The children sat beside her, talking softly, including her without needing sound. Lucy held her hand. Emma told her about school. Sophie leaned her head against the wheelchair, content. When help arrived, it did not feel like rescue. It felt like reunion. Warm blankets, gentle voices, real names exchanged, promises written and signed. Weeks later, the woman sat in a bright room, sunlight touching her face. Therapy sessions were scheduled. A caseworker smiled as paperwork was finalized. Outside the window, snow melted into clear paths. Daniel and his daughters visited often. Not as heroes, as family. One evening, the woman stood with support for the first time. She signed a message through tears and laughter. "Thank you for seeing me." Daniel smiled. His daughters squeezed his hands. In that moment, they all understood something simple and powerful. Kindness does not end a story. It begins a new one.